Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the River's Edge. I am very happy and excited to be here with Maura. Oh, Sammy's not in the picture. My other dog was Charlie before Sammy. I have Maura Sweeney here today. Maura is the ambassador of happiness and is living happily inside out. While in law school in the 80s, she was going down a road that did not fulfill her until she got the courage to say no more. She left law school to go down an unknown road that would begin her encounter with self-discovery and self-determination. It took the courage of letting go of a sure thing to choose the scary unknown. Maura said what daunted her early in life helped prepare her for a future filled with passion, intention, and purpose. She is an author, a speaker, a coach, a podcaster, and she offers online courses on happiness. You do it all, Maura. You do so much. Thank you for coming on.
Thinking, where did you get?
I've been stalking.
Where did you get that intro? You know, Kelly, what I do is really the sum total of who I am. I cannot get away from who I am. And from the earliest point of childhood, I was just one of these people. I was very expansive. I often share this story, so I might as well share it with you now. I grew up in northern New Jersey. Just so everybody knows, I'm in my early 60s, and I say that not to date myself, but to put things in perspective. I had a mother who never wanted me out of the house. And all I wanted to do was go out into the neighborhood and play with friends. So I was one of those free spirits. But beyond that, you know how everybody travels by air today? It's like going on Greyhound buses. Years ago, if you went on an airplane, you were going to go to some exotic destination. And I, as a child, whenever there was an airplane flying above to go to Newark Airport, I would lie on the grass, look up top in the sky and think, who's in that airplane? Where are they going? What countries are they going to? Now, I was like preschool age. And all I wanted to do was go around the world, meet people of every different culture, every appearance, every language. They could wear whatever clothes they wanted to. And I imagine these people as my unmet relatives. So imagine that. That's kind of what I wanted to do. I saw myself going around and being maybe a goodwill ambassador. I didn't know the term for it back then. And I was brought up instead to follow in my late grandfather's footsteps. He was a very prominent attorney in New York and New Jersey. And so my whole life ended up, and nothing was bad. I have used everything and everything's been really good. But I was a free spirit who was being brought up like in the box. And when I graduated from Boston College, political science major, I was chosen to work for Senator Ted Kennedy. Had a summer job there, was offered a full-time job. I go to law school because it's what I'm trained to do, what I'm supposed to do, because after all, we're supposed to please the people around us. And I was taking out student loans. Kelly, it was a 6-semester program. I just started the 4th semester, and what I could see, I thought, oh my gosh, the rest of my life. Now, this is different. Everybody's got to choose their own thing. But back then, very few people went to law school. And if you went, you were expected to practice law. And I remember one of the professors from law school said to me, well, you know, Maura, if you're not in the top 10% of your class, because I said, give me a picture of what's to come. He said, well, if you're not going to graduate in the top 10%, and I was a good student, but I was not passionate. He said, you'll probably end up doing research in a law library. I'm like, are you kidding? And he said, and make $12,000 a year. And I'm thinking, I won't be able to pay my law school loans back. So Kelly, one day I couldn't get out of my chair to get to class because what I found was that the light within me and all the expectation I had for life and purpose and following things I loved, it was like closing in. And I thought, I'm going to have to work in a career that is not my calling, working around books when I'm really designed around people, and living up north when I really wanted to live somewhere else. And I thought, I'm going to have to work 40 years in a career I don't want before I could finally retire, move to Florida, and do what I wanted to do. But my body, now, back then, I'm probably average weight now, but I was as skinny as could be. I couldn't bring myself out of my chair to get in the car and drive to school. My husband and I had gotten married early. He came home from work that night and he said to me, aren't you supposed to be at school? Kelly, I opened up my mouth and nothing came out. I realized because I was trying so hard to be led by estimations and expectations, let's say of parents, but also society, that didn't fit me, I was losing my life. I was like a walking zombie and I had no energy. And then I thought, oh my gosh, I've got to leave. Everybody's going to think she's a failure. What's she going to do? So really, to be a leader, it takes a lot of courage. I mean, and even to figure out how to lead yourself, guide yourself. So there you go. That's a long comment to what you first said.
No, it's so true. And that's what I want to talk about today about, are you being led or are you leading yourself? And it goes in, you got to evaluate. You have to have some self-awareness, right? And be like, what are my beliefs on life to know? Like, if I believe like I can never leave this job because I make so much money and I got to pay my bills, that job's controlling you. You're not controlling it, right?
Are you kidding? You're absolutely right. I have a story for everything. Let me tell you, years later, well, not too much longer, my husband and I moved to Florida, which was fantastic. And I ended up getting a position in the telecom industry, which at the time was really growing. I had no background, but I ended up in sales very quickly thereafter. They moved me into leadership. We had the top office in the country. It was a national corporation. And I just loved developing people, hiring, training, all this. So they said to me, Maura, I had gotten I think it was the Chairman's Award one year, had several people from my office. We all went away on a cruise. And they said, Maura, we'd love to move you. First it was to New York. Then they wanted to move me to the corporate headquarters in Chicago. And they said, you could really move up. There's even more money to be made. And my first thought was, I spent a lifetime trying to get out of the cold. I wanted to move to Florida. And secondly, yes, you may think you're going to offer me more money. I already had a good income down here, but I would have had no life. And Kelly, you hit the nail on the head. I have friends and people I know who have sometimes worked decades in a career that made them so miserable. But for some unknown reason, they felt that either it carried a certain amount of clout or maybe it was paying them well, but they were so unhappy and they were married to the job. And I have to say, to each his own. I mean, some people are willing to do that, but for me, I couldn't get out of the chair. So I had to find something that gave me energy.
How did you work with it? Have you had any clients where you've helped them out of that? How did you change the mindset to where they are able to chase their dreams and let go of the money? Because a lot of people, you don't make the money. You're not going to make the same money as you did at this high paying corporate job. So you're like, well, I need the money. So you got to make a choice, money or happiness. And it ends up being that, right? When it shouldn't have to. That's a belief system though. So
it is. And you know something, I know things are changing so much over the past 10, 20 years. I mean, we had that thing in 07, 08 where so many people lost their houses. They were upside down in their mortgages. They walked away. So a lot of the things that they had built their life upon and maybe their assets went away like that. And then there were a lot of jobs that were sent overseas. So I could see this is ongoing. It's a tough call. I have to say that. I'll tell you this, for about almost a dozen years, I worked my tail off. I was first a recruiter, and then down here I was in the telecom industry and management. So I felt like my life was my work. And I did love it because I loved the people I worked with. I was always building things. But what I did is that I looked to pay off debt. I looked to put myself in a position where if I needed to leave, I could, or if I needed to scale back and do something different. And that takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of self-discipline, because think about this. Think about how commercialized our society was, especially years ago. They used to start with the credit cards. You're worth it. Get that credit card. And you could buy whatever you want because you're worth it. What no one tells you, Kelly, is that, yeah, they could sell you a really great concept, but only one person is going to pay for what you're worth it for. You want to buy the fancy car? You want to buy the $700,000 house? You want to have a nice a nice wardrobe? You want to go out every single night and drink? You're going to have to pay for it. So somewhere along the line, you have to almost step back and think, okay, the world is telling me all these things are important. And I'm not undermining anyone's concept. I think everyone needs to learn what's important to them. And I know I've made several changes. Even my husband and I, we had a computer rep firm, and it was doing very, very well for a long time. We lived in suburbia. I was raising a daughter. We homeschooled her, but I had the dogs. I was a lady in the neighborhood. And what happened is that we realized we were selling stuff. and we had cash, and we kept giving a lot of it away, but it was meaningless to us. And so what we did at the time, and this was before we had the crash of like '08, we sold our home, we exited our business, and we really scaled back. Now you may think I live in a fancy place, but it's just a townhome. And what we did is that we got rid of everything we didn't need. We reduced the overhead so that we, as our daughter was getting ready to go away to school, we would be in a position to have less overhead and pursue things that really matter to us. So everyone's got to make those choices. And, different choices come at different times of our lives. But should I give you one thing on the other side? I had one guy that used to work for me in corporate, and he was so cute. He was a doll. He was from Philadelphia. He was a top seller, and he was all 25 years old. He had cell phones before anybody else had them, and he had his little BMW convertible. So he was just great. And he came into my office one day. He said, "Maura, I'm so depressed." I said, "Why?" He said, "I made X amount of dollars this past year," which was a lot. And he said to me, "I have not $1 to show for it." He said, "I spent everything I made and then some." And so somewhere along the line, he was hysterical, but I thought how great for him that he figured out at a young age, he was buying everything, living the high life, as many even on Wall Street will do. But then he had nothing to show for it. And he still had to pay for the car, the cell phone, which at the time I think was $400 a month. So people have to really assess. It's not so much what's important to somebody else out there or what some celebrity is telling us we need. It's what do I like? What's important to me?
Right. And do you ever go into like the law of attraction when you're working with them and changing your mindset or any spiritual component when you work with your clients?
Funny, the law of attraction people gave me, they certified me as some kind of a coach. Most of who I work with are corporations, universities, young leadership, national leadership organizations. I've spoken a lot overseas, a lot in universities. Now, because of COVID, this is interesting. People have reached out to me where everybody's working on Zoom all day long. They're not in the office. In certain countries, they're not allowed out of the house. I mean, they could go out maybe an hour or two each day to go get food and pick up groceries, but they're depressed and they're isolated. So typically, I'll tell you this, Kelly, and this is one of the other things that I'm good with versus not good with. And I've done this before. I've worked with people one-on-one, and I get exhausted and drained. So I am so much better if I could give a presentation in public in front of 100 people, a couple of hundred people, or even on a webinar, because I've got one coming up on Monday again. It's a national webinar with young people that are part of the AmeriCorps program. I could show them images. I'll get them engaged, say, "What do you think?" I'll tell them stories. I will get them to make connections between themselves and the rest of the world, between behaviors and outcomes, cause and effect. Me and you and everybody else, because there's a lack of awareness, and it's not even an age thing. There's a lot of a lack of awareness. People tend to think maybe it's just my world and what I want, but they don't realize they live among other people. Their behaviors affect other people. And sometimes maybe this is a real key thing. A lot of people see themselves as victims. Life happens to them. And this is where both happiness.
So disempowering.
Do you think? I felt like that as a child. And this is one reason why I ended up, speaking about happiness. As a child, my grandmother used to call me Waterworks. I felt like such a victim that I was always crying. I could cry at the drop of a hat. And I remember as a child thinking, I have to do what I'm told to do right now. But I'm going to make a promise to myself that as I get older, I'm going to be my authentic self. And so what it required was that I did what I needed to do. I went all through school. We paid mortgages. I had a corporate life. I paid bills. Raised a daughter, homeschooled her. We had a business. But the other side of it was I was constantly moving toward things that really mattered. And I think a lot of people think, "Oh, I can't do it because I'm a woman." What's the new one? Because I'm Black, because I'm trans. I know what it's like to feel like a victim, and it's not fun. And you could stay there, but you're kind of becoming your own record, You're always going to get what you have. So you need to change your mindset. And so I always ask people this: whatever you're facing in life, when you want to feel like the victim, ask yourself, before I do anything, I know it's a problem, it feels terrible, I feel terrible, am I viewing myself as a victim or a beneficiary? And if you can answer that question first, wait, you can't believe what it does to your energy. Because you're really forcing yourself to be honest with your own soul. Nobody's there. Okay, am I a victim? Because if I'm seeing myself as a victim, my outcome will be victimhood. But the amazing thing, Kelly, and everything I talk about and everything I share during these presentations I make, I have lived through multiple times. But if you could say to yourself, you know what? I'm going to be a beneficiary. I'm going to see myself as a beneficiary. The outcomes change. First of all, the energy changes. The opportunity for new ideas change. The expectation changes. And I don't know how it happens. The energy shifts, and it may not happen that very moment, but new ideas, solutions, tremendous outcomes come out of it. And here's the other thing. A beneficiary will see themselves as gaining something good. But somebody with a beneficiary mindset will also see a bigger picture, and they'll think, you know what? Now this may sound a little bit like law of attraction, but I live in a benevolent universe, meaning that ultimately everything in the backdrop is going to work out for good. I used to have a manager who said to me in corporate, he said, Maura, he'd come down periodically. He'd say, you know, you put up with so much. He said, I am such a negative guy. He said, you know how to make lemonade out of lemons. And I wasn't aware of it. All I knew is I didn't have a backup plan. Every month I had to produce more sales from a couple of different offices of people. So we were just going to go forward. And Kelly, that attitude of whatever it is, we're going to grow from it, learn from it, challenge ourselves from it. We're going to come up with new solutions. We're going to be more creative. So you actually build upon this whole concept of where can we go from here? And the challenges or the tough times end up becoming times to build character and strength and resolve. Is that a long answer to your question?
No, it's great. It's great. I can hear echo. Can you hear the echo?
I do.
No, I don't know what that is. But anyway, so what are some ways, if you were going to break it down, for people to have the self-awareness to realize in what areas of their life that they're being led?
You know, let me start with this. You know, oftentimes we're really busy. I don't have my phone next to me, but we're always busy receiving information from everywhere else. I can't even say we're outside much socializing, but we have all of these things beaming at us. So this is something I used to do years ago, and I always encourage, we all have to start somewhere. In the morning, before you get out of bed, give yourself 5 minutes and think, okay, what kind of a day do I want to have today? How can I focus myself on my expectations? Sometimes it could be a really good quote from someone, right? For some people, if they're Christian or religious, they can have a religious scripture that really speaks to them, and they take it with them and they carry it with them. And so you kind of think about, where do I want to go today? And you become a little bit mindful and focused. What do I want to focus in on? But even if it's just 5 minutes. And then the second part of the thing you could do is at the end of the day before you go to bed. And I've always been somebody with a notebook. Not everybody uses one. And I mean handwriting. And I'll say at the end of the day, okay, so where did I have my best moments today? Where did I feel the lightest, the happiest, the freest? And that means around people. It means mindset. Because this is where you get awareness. And then where did I feel contained, constrained, reduced, marginalized? And you could start relating it to so many different ways. And so once you become aware of these little things, what makes me feel good during the day? What made me feel bad? You write it down. And then you know what you do? You say to yourself, all right, I just learned something about myself. How can I then start to remove myself emotionally, physically, or otherwise from some of these toxic things in my life. What if you do it 1%, 2%, 5%? You're progressively moving in the right direction. And how can I move forward in these areas where I do feel like I've got some talents that are being used, or people around me that really I work well with, or concepts that are really positive for me? So it's a matter of personal awareness and then keeping up with it, because you almost then become the person who masters their own life and masters where you're going to go. And for each of us, it's different. I mean, I may come across right now, you probably think, oh, this woman is really outgoing, but you'd be surprised. I could talk up a storm and then I've got to go away and I have to be quiet and read, you know? So
Yeah.
all of us have to find what works for us.
Yeah, totally. What about, so right now, what's going on in the world, all the craziness, and people are glued to news, whether it be mainstream media or alternative news stations, and either one, that doesn't bode well when you get too involved in it and you let it dictate your emotional well-being every day, and you're expecting things to happen and they don't happen and you're let down. Like, when's that going to happen? Right? Like, how do they combat that? Because that's not a good place to be waiting every day. Big news is going to happen today. Trump's coming back in office. The whatever is going to happen. Asar is happening tomorrow. We're all going to be rich. It's such
Kelli,
a
you're right.
like you said.
It's like, you know, little kids, you just took their toy away, right? Or you took their lollipop away. It's the up and down and up and down. And it's true. So, you know what? Let me tell you, I have had probably a lifetime of this. I like to tell people I come from what's whole, not from what's divided. I'm one of those people. I'm everywhere. I am with people of every persuasion. I get my energy from it. I also learn from it. And it was years ago. I can remember, and I'll comment on news. It started out with news on the right. It got very, very popular. And then I remember thinking, you know what? I remember it was even like Rush Limbaugh. Eons ago, I thought something just happened with Rush. He used to be the relentless pursuit of the truth. And then all of a sudden, maybe I was cleaning the house and I'd listened to him. And all of a sudden I realized he only wanted certain pieces of information. I'm thinking, okay, so this guy is not for truth everywhere. Then you could look at CNN, you know, like let's say the Fox people, right? They were clearly on the right. CNN was kind of in the middle. Now they're clearly on the left. And when I would listen to this stuff, Kelli, I would get so irritated because I realized both types of networks were playing to a certain audience. And let me say this, it goes right into what you're saying. They were playing to a demographics emotions.
Yes.
And they moved news from what it used to be, which was information, to emotion. And once you get people caught in an emotional spiral, they're afraid, they're divided, they distrust one another. And I just had to get rid of all of it. And I know what you're saying, even about a lot of these other movements that go on. I will go in and out of different places. I listen to everyone. But you know what my biggest thing is that I do? I explore things on my own. Like, let's say you hear something that sounds crazy. And I realize I'm different from others. I will go directly to the source, or I will ask someone who works in that line of business, are you aware of this? Does this happen where you are? I'll just give you one example. And this kind of keeps me at a level place. It keeps me humble because I'm always learning about what's going on, and far less judgmental. And that's what the media is trying to do. Right?
Yeah, totally. This race war and everything, like, we're all united. We're all one. Like, stop fighting.
I agree with you, Kelli. I agree. And you know what? This shocks me. Yeah, I already told you I'm in my early 60s. I remember growing up being so proud of our country. Why? Because we had people coming from everywhere. We were the melting pot. We were one nation united. Now, when did this start that we're all of a sudden divided? How did this happen? It happened because of media. And you know, I'm going to say something further, and people might not like this. People look at left versus right. What they don't consider is establishment up here versus everybody else. And it's not just a U.S. thing. I tell people all the time when they want to have a problem or an issue with someone who's not their gender, color, or ethnic group. That
Right.
what you see going on in America, this happens all the time in Europe. This is happening everywhere. And so you're either going to be a wise person who knows how to relate to their neighbors, or you're going to find that you are being used, let's say it this way, being led by people in an establishment community that literally want to tear you, your family, your neighborhood, and your community and your nation apart. It's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, so take a look back, like whoever you're depending on, getting the news from, or even just the need to hear news. Why do you even need to hear the news in the first place? I know it's interesting, and I listen to stuff too. I listen to people's videos, but I have a breaking point where I need silence. I can have anything on. I just got to be, and I need that a lot. Like every day, I need it throughout the day. I have to have complete and utter silence.
So see, well, then we're not too different. Let me share something. It just came to mind. That I don't know if you know this, I travel a lot. I've been to maybe over 60 countries, and many of the countries that I've been to, or several, I have spoken at many times. But anyway, that being said, I had an awakening moment many years ago, and this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about in terms of the world we think we live in because the media tells us, and the real world when you actually get an insider's view. I'll tell you two stories. A number of years ago, we were on a family cruise somewhere, and they had a man by the name of Dick Morris, who was a speaker. Now, I love going to listen to people. Dick Morris at the time had worked for 10 years for Bill and Hillary Clinton. And he was with them from Arkansas all the way up through the White House. And I think at one point, once in the White House, he had something going on with his wife. He had to leave. Okay. The guy was a brilliant political operative. Okay. At the time that he was on this cruise ship, and I had a chance to speak with him, he had left the Clinton White House, and he was looking for other work. And I said to him, tell me something, since you've been up in Washington, D.C., what do you suppose is the biggest thing keeping the left and the right from working together? And he said to me, that is the most brilliant question I've heard in 25 years. I'm thinking, brilliant. That's so obvious. Why can't people get along? Guess what he said to me? Are you ready for the answer?
I'm ready.
He said, people on the left and the right up in Congress, so take it at any level you want, right? They can solve their issues within a half hour at a time. And he said, but I'll tell you this, they never will. And he said the reason why is unless they have a problem, they cannot get campaign money to support them. So it behooves them, and it actually benefits them not to solve problems, but to keep an enemy out there on the other side of the lot. It happens on the left and it happens on the right. Now think about that. These are our elected officials. I'm sure many of them, when they first get there, mean to do well, but it's the system. And I'll give you another story. These are a couple of years ago.
I didn't understand that one so much. Why does it behoove them to keep an enemy?
Because if you are an elected official, you're a member of Congress, right? And you want to stay there, and you want to work with your constituency and get them behind you to vote for you, to give you campaign monies. There's nothing to give you campaign monies for, and nothing to fight if there's not a problem. So the problems,
you don't want this.
Problems are part of the program. And see, we always need an enemy, right? That's why you see this. The program works. If they solve a problem, you may not need them. The energy, the emotions, the negative emotions, the fear, the fight is what they need. So if they remove the fight by saying, hey, let's sit down and see how we can work this out for our constituents, for the American public, then it just undermines that. Okay, that's one thing. Does that make sense now?
Totally.
Listen to this one. You ready for this?
I'm saving your life. I'm saving you from this big evil monster over here, right?
And here's the thing, the people on the left, they are afraid of the people on the right. They think they're crazy. The people on the right think the lefties are crazy. So you get it? Yeah. Now me, I'm out with everybody. I'm a no party affiliation, and I will speak with everybody, and I'm always learning from both sides. I want to tell you another really interesting, I would say it was an eye-opening story. Several years ago, I was speaking at a large conference. It was for young leaders from Southeastern Europe. Okay, and while there, we had people from Harvard and big corporations, and there was a woman that was running this. She was a very young woman. She was the, she was the young advisor to a head of a country. All right. Anyway, young woman, she was newly out of college, and she got in touch with me and she said, Maura, I need to come to Washington, D.C. over the summer. She said, I've been offered a paid internship. And I said, really? She said, so do you know anybody in Washington, D.C. where I could rent a room from or whatever? And I said, oh, that's very interesting. I said, tell me, what are you doing now? This is the summer of 2015, Kelli. And she said to me, well, I'll be working at the Podesta agency. And I said to her, oh, that's a familiar name, but I couldn't at the time remember who Podesta was. I said, well, what exactly will you be doing? She said, well, they're not an advertising, a PR agency, and they're representing 2 candidates who will be running for president here in the United States. I said, really? Which 2 candidates? So she said, well, one of them is Hillary Clinton. I said, okay, that makes sense. I said, who's the other one? Now, if the same agency was going to be representing 2 candidates, both of whom were running for the same position, and one of those candidates is Hillary Clinton, who would you think would be their other candidate?
I think it must be Trump. He was the opposition, so that doesn't make sense.
No, it was Bush. Now, my thought was, why would you? It was Jeb Bush. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. We have the same agency in Washington, D.C. choosing Hillary Clinton from the Clinton dynasty and then Jeb Bush from the Bush dynasty. Why can't these people get their own agencies, and why are they trusting the same agency to represent both of their interests? I thought it was very strange. And then I said to this young woman, I said, well, who do you think's going to win? She said, oh, Hillary, of course. Well, the reason why this was interesting to me is that they were the chosen candidates, and they were the establishment candidates. Trump was not establishment. And, it was interesting. They were pre-selected. And what happened is that Jeb Bush ended being thrown out very soon thereafter. And really the one who should have been on the left would have been a Bernie Sanders, but there was so much going on. But do you see how the American public thinks they choose people? They don't realize these people are being chosen from far above. And meanwhile, they're arguing and fighting with each other about their particular version of events, and maybe even I would call it their moral high ground, because if you look at both sides, they both own a certain moral high ground while attacking the others. But it's the same people who are on the top, kind of dictating subtly, and we've got ourselves on the streets arguing with each other over nonsense. Do you see how
we're getting sucked into the nonsense and being led by this corrupt government that exists, that is manipulating all of us. And then it takes our focus off of ourselves and creating the life we want. And then now we get sucked into all this nonsense that has nothing to do with our happiness in life. It's just making us unhappy in life. And it takes away from our well-being.
I agree. So those are just a couple of little things, but you could find things like that everywhere. But the idea of self-awareness, not necessarily taking everything you see as if it's gospel truth, finding out what the motivations might be. So that might be politics. We had it there. You could go into religion. You could go into an industry and find out that there's a certain train of thought. And you may or may not agree with that thought. But the idea of being a leader is, well, how do I feel about that? Can I question what's going on? Do I agree with management? Do I like their ethics? And if we don't, are we willing to question a few things, to advocate for something better? And if it's not right, maybe find some ways to extricate ourselves or come up with a plan B. Because you know what, bottom line, Kelli, and I don't mean to even minimize any of this, because life is not easy. But for so many people, we swallow things we don't like, or we accept as truth things that our soul says something here doesn't sound right. And then what we end up doing is that we live a life that is foreign from who we really are. And the more we do that, the less we are like ourselves. And then, you want to talk about the power of happiness? When people feel like their lives are in harmony. and they're doing things that fall in line with their belief systems or their passions or their interests, and they feel free to express themselves, the energy and the success levels are incredible. On the other side, when people feel like they are being constrained or forced into things they don't believe in, or behaviors that really conflict with their own ethics, they end up losing energy and they become far less productive. And I want to tell you, when I was in my corporate life, as much as it kind of burnt me out for a while, we did exceptionally well all the time because I always focused in on people's freedom, respect, a vision of what we're going to do together. Everyone was part of the whole, and I always looked to keep up that idea of like the feel factor. Does it feel fresh and happy and dynamic? And do people feel like they have a chance to speak their voice? And the results we got, I'm not going to tell you we're the best people, but it was tied into those elements that really have to do with personal happiness, personal freedom, and knowing that you count and you matter where you are, and really striving to be your best, whatever that may be.
And in your work with the corporations, did you come across employees that they were in the wrong job, they were just unhappy, and it wasn't about not being heard, but they were too scared to say that because they didn't want to lose their job? So were they being honest with you and saying, no, I really don't like it, because they don't want to lose their job if they need the money, right?
You know what? That's true. And this is another thing too. You know, sometimes you're in the wrong occupation, and then you start to think you're not that great. All you need to do is to be moved somewhere else, and you might flourish. I remember there were a couple of people that I was with, or that I had on my staff, and they might, let's say they were in sales, or they could have been in any position. I was mostly managing salespeople and managers and support people that were responsible for keeping customers. But I moved a couple of people around, and they went from being ordinary to extraordinary. Then there were a couple of other people that I said, you know what? I don't know if this industry is really lighting you up. Can I help you find something that you can really enjoy and do better at? And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. I could have been still maybe getting ready to retire from being the New York, New Jersey lawyer, and I would have been okay. I would have been maybe B level if you wanted a grade, B, maybe a B minus. I don't know. But if you could move me into another venue where I really was passionate, then my energy goes up, and I'm going to put my effort out there because I love what I'm doing. And so I even remember in my corporate days before I became a public speaker, which is where I got so much of my material from, moving people and letting them know that you don't have, just because you're not excelling in this one thing over here doesn't mean you're not an excellent person. It's just a matter of finding those connections where you can bring forth your best. And let me tell you, that's one of the things that's wrong with our society. We only think there's a couple of things that matter. I always bring this story up. We had one guy who worked for us. He wasn't the best salesperson because his wife used to control all of his money, and he would just sell whatever he needed to. But the guy was one of the most entertaining, fun people anywhere. Now, if you ever work in a corporation where there's, every month there's new numbers that have to be brought together. I could remember that I used to say to him, but we'd have a sales meeting. I'd say, look, everybody was feeling all the pressure from our corporate office, or, new plans that were coming out for the next quarter. And it's like, oh my gosh, all this pressure. And I would say to him, Bob, before we all go out, get up here, do your thing. And he was an entertainer. He used to do, who's it? Andrew Dice Clay. He was a comedian, but in my office, nobody was ever able to use any bad language, but he would have that thing going. People would, in that instant, go from feeling so heavy, like, oh my gosh, we have so many sales that we've got to make. There's such pressure. There's so much competition in the marketplace. Can I even go out the door and talk to people? And he'd break the ice. He'd have everybody cracking up. The energy would change, and everybody would go out and do beautifully. The power of happiness is so strong, and it's so tied to success. And so here I want to tell you, Bob may not have been our most successful salesperson, but what he added to the organization was a lift, something I couldn't bring because I can't imitate anybody. And people loved it. So
That makes a huge difference.
it does. And so everybody, this is one of the things I do when I'm speaking even with corporate people. Everybody has a job to do, but maybe there's something in your personality or some skill set that you didn't go to school for, and it's not necessarily part of your official job title, but it's something you bring to the mix. And this could be in an organization, it could be at work. And then let that guide you. Let that be the wings underneath you. Like, I'll tell you this, I was never into high tech. And even though we were in sort of tech, early tech, I would bring people up and I would have them train me. I'd have them train the offices. And then everybody grew exponentially because we all grew from each other. And then my big thing was I knew how to pick great people. I knew how to train. I knew how to develop managers. I knew how to create winning organizations. So I, in a sense, was able to focus in on a lot of what were my strengths. And then I would bring other people in and say, this is your thing, go do it. And we all would learn from each other. It's a completely different dynamic from what the world is like. I got to be number one and you can't be good. And I've got to be better than you. And I think there's a lot of negative energy in that.
There is such a negative energy. What if someone has emotional stuff they've not worked on and now it's become part of their personality? They're just horrible to be around. And they bring it up
that
to work.
Never happened, Kelly.
That's never, I know, it's totally a fake story, an example. So like they've not worked on their stuff, so they get irritated easily. Their just personality kind of sucks because they don't work on their personal stuff. So they obviously going to bring that into the workplace because they're not changing who they are overnight at work.
Well, I think that we all have a chance to grow up. And you know what? It's very interesting. Sometimes we can be super smart, right? And adept at something, but we can have rotten personalities because we never developed our emotional stability, right? Or our social skills. And, I obviously we have to deal with things like this today, but as in my management days, I would first of all let people know what the expectation was, and I would model it. So let's assume somebody's listening today and they work in an office and they have a rotten manager, because you're not always the person in the lead, but you can be the one that models the right behavior. That's one thing you could always do. And I speak about this a lot. And people often will catch something better. But let's say if you can't, I think sometimes it's good to have a private conversation with someone. Say, it seems like you're having some difficulties. Would you like to share some of it? And then also to say, but do you also realize you're working with other people? Are you aware of that some of your behaviors are now leaking out and affecting other people? So what I used to do is I would have a couple of conversations. I would get some level of understanding and agreement. We would document it, and we'd be looking for better behavior. And I was always, I like to tell people that my strengths are only outweighed by my weaknesses. So I never put myself as Miss Perfect, and I never would. But I'm always looking at ways that we can improve. But it's a choice, Kelly. So let's say someone who is repeatedly behaving poorly.
Yeah.
Then ultimately they need to be walked down a path to say, you know what, I want to make space for you. But if you're unable to realize that your space is negatively impacting the space of other people, we're going to have a time for you to find somewhere else to work. And you know what, let me go back to saying this. Remember I said you could either see yourself as a victim or a beneficiary? I had a number of people, I had many people I hired, people I'm still in touch with today, and wonderful friends, and a few other people that had to be let go. But in a beneficiary type universe, I would always think to myself, I'm not looking to hurt people. I'm looking to help people learn. And let me tell you, some of our biggest learning experiences in life can be when we do fall, when our behaviors end up bringing us to a place we don't want. But if we could make that connection, what gain? You have become a beneficiary. You might not like the way it feels right now, but imagine you say you're going to go to your next job and it's like, okay, I'm not going to behave like a 2-year-old again. I'm not going to bring all my, but that happens. You know that, right? So
True.
You could use you.
Someone has a question for you.
Sure.
I was a manager in a semicon company and they taught us to fake good. Are you familiar with that item? I mean, that's sorry.
I see it. What is fake good? Fake good.
Fake good, like fake that you're happy and good in life? Crazy.
I don't know. You know, somebody said to me, I was doing a webinar with an international tech company about 2 weeks ago. And when I was doing the presentation, someone had a question and they said, Maura, how do you feel about toxic happiness? Like, what is toxic happiness?
That's an oxymoron.
I don't know if fake good is, but I would say people know the difference between genuine and false. And sometimes that's another thing. Like, let's say you work in a terrible company that has really bad energies. And I mean, I've even had some people that I worked for that were not so great, or they play mind control games. I had to learn, even from my early life. Oh, how cute.
I'm sorry, he wanted to go.
I love dogs. Sweet. But I had to learn how to master my own emotions. And it's a strong thing. You can actually master your own emotions. One of the things I would say is that if people attack you, what do you normally want to do? You want to attack right back. And it could be someone you're working with laterally. It could be a client. It could be a manager. It could be somebody beneath you. And I always say if I feel emotional, or if somebody maybe is saying something to me, I'll always take time and say nothing. And when I have the right attitude and the right frame of mind where I'm not seeing myself as a victim, but I'm seeing myself as a beneficiary, I'll bring back information or a question or a discussion. But the whole idea is I'm looking for resolution. I'm looking to bring things to a better place. So as far as fake good, I don't know what that is, but I know that whether we are beneath people on the corporate ladder, or we are working alongside of someone, or someone is beneath us, that we always need to treat people with respect and treat ourselves with respect. And somewhere in there, we end up not giving away our own dignity and our own sense of self-worth. And, you know, oftentimes there are some nasty people out there. We could see it when we're growing up in school or in the schoolyard, and it works all through life. But we can either choose to hold on to our dignity and our self-respect, or let it go and become a victim. And then usually if we follow down that path, it's not a happy one. I hope that helped a little bit.
Yeah, it's such a relief when you start to more of your life, and when you start taking control of your life and you realize I wasn't in control. Now I am. I know how to create happiness now. It's like such a eye-opening experience, and it just feels so good, right? To feel like you're in, just even like cleaning my apartment, just getting it organized the way I want and having it in order just feels like such happiness. Feels like a relief.
It is.
Like
it's empowerment.
Yeah,
it is
totally
empowerment. And you know something too? Sometimes I think we put our own expectations up so high. I learned this a long time ago. I don't even know if I learned it or it was innate. I never competed with other people, but I would compete with myself. I think, how can I improve myself a little bit more in whatever area I'm working on? And you feel so good when you have, and even if it's 5% better, right? 5% better. Then you take that 5 and you move it up to 10 and you feel better. Kelli, I know we only have a certain amount of time, but that's right. Do you know what I was thinking about? And I hope I can remember this because it was my own survey. Not only did I learn how to be a leader in corporate life with the power of happiness, and then to do it kind of in my personal life, but and then I speak about it wherever I go. But I also did a survey, and it was people from like 25 states, 28 foreign countries, and I asked them all this. And they were like from 16 to 92 years old, every background, you know, okay. And I said to them, if you had to describe happiness in only a few words, what words would you use to describe happiness? And you know, it was so amazing. All these people of every age, every background, every economic dynamic, people highly educated and not, some people married, divorced, whatever. Do you know there were 5 things that it seemed like everybody agreed upon? The first thing they were looking for to define the sense of happiness was healthy relationships. And I hope whoever is listening is writing this down, because you could use it in your own life and then you could help encourage others. Healthy relationships. You know what that means? You want less drama. Some people live around drama and they're unaware of it. But when you could say to yourself, and that's when early morning thinking, where's my day going? And at the end of the night, you look back at your day and think, where were my good points, my bad points? Where did I feel light and happy versus heavy or depressed? What are my relationships looking like? And if I have really good ones, can I move toward the healthy ones? And if I have some that are not so healthy, can I find some ways to distance myself? Or right? That's number one. Number two, this is so crazy. I'm like drawing a blank. Hold on. Healthy relationships. Freedom. How did you know? That was number three. There's a number two in there too. Oh, wait a minute. Peace of mind is number two. Think about this. You put your head down at night to sleep and you're not tormented. Think about what that means. Do you know? Think about this. If you could even look at these 5 little elements. So peace of mind, healthy relationships, peace of mind. The next is freedom. Now think about this. There's all different types of life. You could be a mom with 3 kids and you're working a full-time job. You don't have much freedom. But if you could find even a few minutes, a day or a week, to dedicate to things that are important to you. And I had to do that. Do you know what that does for your sense of well-being? The sense of freedom, it uplifts you. Number 4, doing something that makes you feel purposeful and satisfied. And let me tell you, even with my work, I probably wouldn't have chosen telecom as my company because I'm a real people person. This was in my old life. I've had several lives. Same husband, several lives. But I found things that made my corporate career feel so purposeful. And it was investing in other people's lives. It was building cultures. It was creating new managers in other offices, starting new things that I got so much energy out of. So if you could find something in life that makes you feel purposeful, it could be, I'm going to go to the library and I'm going to read to young children or help. I'm going to walk dogs, doesn't matter. Or I'm going to pursue something I'm really interested in. And the more I do it, the more purposeful I'll feel. And the 5th thing is, confidence. Now, here's the interesting thing. If you look at healthy relationships, what do we say number 2 was? This is so funny. Take away my cheat sheet and I'm lost. What was peace of mind.
Yeah, or
freedom.
Freedom.
The chance to do things that make you feel purposeful and relevant. If you do those things, you feel more confident in life. You know why? Because now what you've done is you've taken the inside part of you and you've externalized it. You've taken things that are important to you, things that reflect your values, your interests, your curiosities, and even things you want to do. And you build yourself up. You have a natural confidence. And then guess what? You're no longer somebody else's victim and you're not your own victim. And you become one who leads yourself.
So
Sounds
true.
so easy,
When you tap into who you are and what your strengths are, and then you do things that make you happy in life, it totally builds confidence. Because otherwise, you're not acting out your true authentic self. You're not living your true authentic self, and then it's a terrible feeling.
And I know it because I was there. You're right, but there's a lot of people, they don't slow down enough, or maybe they haven't had a come to Jesus moment like I did. I couldn't get out of the chair. It was terrible. It was 23 years of my life, all geared toward one end, and my body refused to go there. But it really can help each and every one of us grow. And my feeling is, I'd say my overall mission, I want to see a better world. I want to see happier people. I want to see a more harmonious society. And I know we can get there when we change the way we think, when we do become our own best leader, and when we live in a healthy fashion from the inside out. And that's what my podcast is. It's living happy from the inside out. Nobody teaches us this. We could get PhDs. We could be making a ton of money, living in a great house, and feel like our lives are falling apart. Or we can decide, what are those things that are really important to us? What speaks for us? How do I focus in on those things, separated from the other things I really don't need? And now I have a little more room to think, to plan, to choose. And it makes for a better life, whether you're younger, older, whether you live here in America or someplace else.
Yeah, it makes all the difference in the world. I love it. You know, I want to have someone on to talk about addiction, like an addiction specialist, talk about the spirituality of it and how to overcome it. Do you know anyone? I think that would be a really cool topic.
Fortunately, I've never had an addiction problem, but I'm a good connector, Kelly. So you know what? I will think, let me give some thoughts to that, because you know what? That's an outgrowth of being like bifurcated from yourself. Like when you're not living at ease and at home in your own skin, what do? You end up medicating.
Yeah, exactly. Numbing yourself, medicating. And I want to talk about, because people look at it as always a physical, and it's so much, as you and I both know, it's physical is just, it becomes physical, but it really doesn't start there. It does never start there. And so just to talk about all that, that would be cool. Yeah, as if you know anyone, but.
If I do, I'll let you know.
Sadly, we are out of time, but it was so fun talking to you. I love it.
You too. Sorry, I couldn't remember the top 5 things that people say in my own survey that make them happy. But hopefully, we got through it.
You remembered all of them in the end.
Kelly, it was great spending time with you, and I hope to stay in touch.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Maura. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye.